Every person, no matter their background, has quietly asked themselves one haunting question: what happens after we die? It's not a fear reserved only for the end, but a mystery stitched into the fabric of life itself. Beneath every ambition, every heartbreak, every fleeting joy, something whispers, there's more than this. And so, we find ourselves not merely alive, but orbiting a question older than civilization. Where do we go when life ends? And who are we before we arrive? Among those who dared to lift the veil on this mystery was Manly P. Hall, a scholar of the esoteric, a mystic philosopher whose insights brought light to the shadowed corners of human understanding. Through his observations and collected wisdoms, he charted what many call the soul's cycle, a sweeping arc that extends from birth to death and spirals into dimensions beyond what the eye can see. His message wasn't one of superstition, but of quiet certainty. Existence doesn't end at the grave, it transforms. Let us then follow this cycle together, closely, carefully, as Hall described it, not with blind belief, but with open awareness. What you're about to hear isn't a rigid doctrine, but a lens. Through it, the known world begins to melt into the unknown, and the human story stretches beyond the final breath. The soul's entrance into physical life is not a coincidence, nor is it an arbitrary flicker in the cosmos. It is a calculated step within a much larger cycle, an intentional descent into the material world for the sake of transformation. Manly P. Hall viewed birth not merely as a biological event, but as a sacred crossing from one dimension of existence into another, a return perhaps from an unseen realm of rest and reflection into the dense atmosphere of form, effort, and growth. This act of incarnation is not punishment nor exile. It is a classroom opening its doors. From the very first cry of a newborn, pain announces itself. The body, barely formed, feels discomfort. The lungs heave against the air. Light pierces fragile eyes. Why must life begin with suffering? According to Hall, this is not because pain is intrinsic to life, but because the soul arrives into a world already disfigured by collective misunderstanding. The inherited burdens of countless ancestors, fear, disease, confusion, are woven into the fabric of culture, bloodlines, and systems. The soul enters pure, yet it must now navigate impurities not of its own making. In ancient civilizations, birth was seen not only as a beginning, but as a re-entry. A soul once dormant in unseen dimensions, now clothed again in flesh. Just as the earth receives seeds that carry the memories of seasons past, so the body receives a soul with impressions formed long before the present lifetime. These impressions, though invisible, manifest as inclinations, talents, instincts, and also as challenges. They are not curses, they are unresolved energies seeking refinement through experience. Hall emphasized that the body is not a prison, but a garment, the outer layer of a deeper being. The soul, he wrote, does not own the body, it leases it. Like a tenant in a sacred temple, it has the right to inhabit, to learn, to express, but not to claim ownership. Every sensation, every relationship, every trial in the physical realm becomes material for the soul's sculpting. Earth becomes the crucible in which divine sparks are forged into flame. In this early stage of the soul's journey, the child is not yet aware of its task, but the world wastes no time in shaping perception. Families, schools, religions, and governments pour beliefs into the vessel. And here lies the critical point Hall urged humanity to understand. The soul's mission is not to accept blindly, but to awaken gradually, to question, to remember, to realign with the deeper truth that lies beneath surface identity. Awakening is not a lightning strike, it is a slow dawn breaking within. Thus, birth is not merely a point on a timeline, it is the opening of a sacred cycle. The soul embarks on a journey through sensation and form to rediscover its own divine nature. While the world may seem broken, Hall believed the purpose of life was not to escape it, but to restore its forgotten harmony through conscious living. From this point onward, the journey of becoming truly begins. Once the soul has taken up its lease within the human body, it begins a complex engagement with the world, a world not as it was intended, but as it has been shaped. Manly P. Hall observed that much of human suffering does not stem from cosmic cruelty or divine neglect, but from deviation. The laws of nature, originally set in harmony, have been rewritten by the will of man. In replacing obedience with dominance, simplicity with complexity, humanity created not paradise, but a labyrinth of its own making. The original blueprint, Hall explained, was not diseased. Birth was not meant to be traumatic. Living was not meant to be a series of battles against one's own nature. Yet everywhere, struggle prevails. Bodies weaken early. Emotions spin out of balance. Entire communities are structured around competition, mistrust, and fear. What began as a garden of growth has become, in many ways, a battlefield of survival. The divine intention remains beneath it all, unchanged, but it has been covered by layers of collective misinterpretation. Instead of cooperating with nature, humanity has tried to manage it. Laws of harmony were traded for systems of control. Hall pointed to this as the spiritual tragedy of our age, the illusion that mankind can improve on the rhythms of life by bypassing them altogether. The result is a world where artificiality thrives, unnatural food, unnatural schedules, unnatural goals, while the spirit, neglected, falls into silence. And when the soul loses its voice, the body begins to suffer in its place. Illnesses multiply, not because the body is flawed, but because the balance between soul and form has been broken. The physical system, as Hall described it, is meant to be strong, vital, and resilient. Its deterioration is not a sentence from above, but a symptom from within. Modern plagues, addiction, stress, violence, spiritual numbness, are echoes of deeper misalignments. They are warning bells, not curses. Through them, life calls the soul back to its forgotten responsibility, to live not as a master over creation, but as a servant of its principles. Yet there is hope in this disruption. The very missteps that caused imbalance contain within them the potential for realignment. Hall believed that the act of healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, is a return to the original design. Even small acts of honesty, compassion, simplicity, or restraint begin to retune the body's magnetic field. As each person shifts inward, the distortions in the collective field begin to loosen. The soul does not punish, it corrects. Suffering is not a verdict, it is a signal. What society calls disease may, in deeper terms, be the body's resistance to false living. Every reckless decision etched into the mind and flesh carries weight, but every conscious correction rewrites the pattern. The work is difficult because the inheritance is dense. Generations of misdirection do not vanish overnight, but the soul, though quiet, is patient. It waits behind the noise for the moment it is remembered, and when it is, healing becomes not only possible, it becomes inevitable. So life, interrupted by deviation, continues to offer the opportunity to restore the sacred balance. Hall did not speak of guilt or shame. His message was not one of condemnation. Rather, he offered a sober truth. Mankind has the right to ruin, but also the right to redemption. Within the same world that contains pollution, cruelty, and despair, exists the seed of clarity, restoration, and peace. All that is broken can be mended, but only by recognizing that what has been altered can, through wisdom, be brought back to order. As the soul completes its term in the body, the physical form begins to fray. Muscles weaken, memory fades, breath slows. For many, this decline evokes fear, but Manly P. Hall urged a different perspective. Death, in his view, is not a punishment nor an abyss. It is a transition, a change in state, not in essence. Much like sleep comes at the end of a long day, death arrives gently at the end of a long life, not to erase but to renew. The process is neither sudden nor chaotic. Hall described it as a subtle movement of energies, an orderly withdrawal. As the vital functions recede, the life force contracts into the center of the being. It travels upward, ascending the spinal column, following the path of the pneumogastric nerve until it reaches the crown of the head. There, at the gateway between the seen and the unseen, the soul quietly departs. The body remains still, but the traveler has gone on. The thread that once tethered spirit to flesh, an invisible umbilical cord, is severed, and with it, the contract of embodiment ends. What follows is not void, but re-entry. The soul passes into the energetic dimension, what Hall referred to as the vital or etheric body. This subtle form resembles the physical one, but is composed entirely of energy. It is within this sheath that the soul conducts its first review. Hall emphasized that consciousness remains intact after death. The individual, though no longer physical, becomes more vividly aware. Life is reflected upon, not through judgment, but through clarity. Truth, no longer distorted by the noise of material life, becomes self-evident. This etheric double does not vanish immediately. Like the physical corpse, it takes time to dissolve. What lingers may be sensed as a ghost, a shade, a whisper of the life that was, but it is hollow, a shell, not the soul. The living often mistake these phantoms for the person they loved, yet Hall clarified that the real soul has already moved forward. What remains is an imprint, the residue of habit and memory slowly fading into the currents of the invisible world. Beyond the energetic body lies the emotional world. Here, the soul engages the full weight of feeling, joys that were suppressed, regrets that were ignored, anger that was buried, all emerge with startling intensity, not to torture, but to be understood. This stage, known to some traditions as the Kamaloka, is not hell. It is healing through confrontation. Emotions, Hall taught, are lessons. When unprocessed, they become shadows. When embraced, they become light. Each level of the afterlife is governed by its own laws. Just as the body follows biology, the emotional body follows resonance. Souls vibrate to the frequency of their inner state. Peaceful ones rise quickly. Troubled ones linger until they reconcile their inner disharmony. No one is banished, and no one is lost. All are offered the chance to rise, even if it takes time. Hall's vision was not one of eternal judgment, but of eternal opportunity. Death, then, is not a vanishing, but a revealing. The soul steps through a door, not into darkness, but into clearer light. It carries with it not what it possessed, but what it became. Gold cannot pass through, nor titles, nor names. Only wisdom, sincerity, and love make the crossing. What awaits is not a paradise given, but a reflection earned. And in that mirror, the soul meets itself, fully, honestly, and with the grace of knowing that every ending is a threshold. After passing through the emotional realms, the soul arrives at a more refined domain, the mental world. Here, thought detaches from the turbulence of passion and takes on the quality of pure structure. Manly P. Hall regarded this plane not as a place of abstract logic, but as a sanctuary of meaning. Within it, every experience gathered from the lower worlds is examined with clarity and depth. The soul becomes the architect of its own inner temple, drawing not from speculation, but from lived truth. In this mental sphere, there is no deception. The masks worn in physical life, constructed for approval, defense, or ambition, are gone. What remains is essence, the distilled intelligence, the integrated lessons, the truths that have survived both pleasure and pain. Hall noted that this is where the soul evaluates the blueprint of its last incarnation. Nothing escapes notice. Every motive is weighed, every intention exposed to the full light of understanding, not in shame, but in revelation. The mind, in this elevated context, serves as a mirror for the soul's integrity. Thoughts that once seemed fleeting are now seen as building blocks. Idle judgments, unspoken dreams, acts of sincerity, all carry weight here. The soul sifts through them like a weaver at a loom, selecting threads that will shape the next cycle of becoming. Hall explained that this is the space in which karmic patterns are truly understood. No external being hands down a verdict. The soul writes its own future with the ink of past choices. This realm is also where the soul crafts its spiritual garment, a concept Hall likened to St. Paul's wedding garment in the Book of Revelation. It is not a robe of reward, but one of accumulated experience. Each lifetime adds to it. Each lesson deepens its texture. In this garment is woven the soul's readiness, not for judgment, but for further integration with the divine order. Those who lived consciously find here a peace that affirms their path. Those who lived in disarray are not condemned, but are shown clearly and kindly where alignment was lost. What begins in this world of thought does not remain there. The mental realm prepares the soul to return again to embodiment, or to move forward to greater realities if its growth permits. It becomes the chamber where potential is clarified and destiny is outlined. Hall viewed this phase as one of the most important stages in the soul's development, for here, insight ripens into purpose. The architecture of the next journey is drafted not by fate, but by conscious self-recognition. What the soul has built in thought becomes the framework through which it will continue to evolve. When the soul has passed through the realms of energy, emotion, and thought, it faces a moment of decision, not dictated by an external force, but by the balance it has created within. Manly P. Hall emphasized that reincarnation is not a punishment imposed by divine law, but a rhythm inherent in the soul's unfinished growth. Just as a student returns to school to complete a lesson not yet mastered, so the soul returns to embodiment to resolve what remains incomplete. These returns are not random. They follow a logic as intricate and exact as any law of nature. What the soul has built, it must inhabit. What it has broken, it must mend. Karma, often misunderstood as a grim tally of punishment, is, in Hall's words, the architect of justice and renewal. It is the echo of past intention vibrating into future experience. Every act of kindness creates a door. Every selfish act builds a wall. Karma is not cruel. It is corrective. Like a potter's hands around clay, it shapes the soul toward its highest form. In this way, the cycles of reincarnation become alchemical, transforming pain into wisdom, ignorance into understanding, and limitation into strength. Hall reminded that even the darkest experiences can be transmuted if approached with sincerity and willingness to grow. Within these spiraling returns lies a deeper truth. Nothing is ever wasted. Even failure, when recognized, becomes fuel for evolution. Hall viewed the soul's journey not as a straight line, but as a sacred spiral, each life a loop that brings the being closer to its divine center. And although the soul may circle the same lessons many times, each revolution brings new light, new perspective, and greater clarity. This, he taught, is the secret strength of karma, not as retribution, but as renewal. Beyond the spirals of birth and rebirth lies a horizon scarcely imagined, a threshold not marked by another return, but by transcendence. Manly P. Hall described this state as the point at which the soul, having gathered and refined the totality of its experiences, no longer requires a physical vessel. The lessons have been integrated, the debts have been balanced, the echoes of karma have quieted. Reincarnation, once a necessity, becomes an option and then dissolves entirely. The soul stands not above life, but within its deepest truth, whole, luminous, and free. In this rarefied state, the soul enters what mystics have long called the higher planes, a region not made of thought, emotion, or energy, but of pure essence. It is not a place, but a state of being. Hall likened it to returning home after countless voyages. The individuality is not lost, but harmonized. The soul becomes what it always was beneath the veils, a conscious extension of divine intelligence. No longer fragmented by ego or delusion, it becomes a conduit for universal purpose. Here the soul does not seek, it simply is. This light beyond the cycle is not a reward for perfection, but the natural consequence of self-realization. Hall taught that evolution is inevitable. No soul is cast away. All are moving toward the same center, some swiftly, some slowly. The delays are only detours born of misunderstanding. But when understanding flowers, when the soul awakens fully to its unity with the eternal, it steps beyond the wheel. It is no longer bound to grow through opposition. It now grows through service, through creativity, through love untouched by fear. And yet, even in this exalted state, the soul does not vanish into abstraction. It radiates, it inspires. It may return not out of need but out of compassion, to help those still bound in the dream of separation. Hall believed that the greatest souls are not those who escape the world, but those who choose to return to it with wisdom and mercy. The light beyond the cycle is not escape, it is illumination, and those who reach it become the living stars by which others find their way.